the proposed revised vehicular access, which you can see on the slide before you, has been assessed by the Highways Authority to be safe and appropriately designed. Furthermore, it's been demonstrated that development will have an acceptable impact upon the local highway network, whilst the use of sustainable transportation methods will be promoted through the travel plan, which will be monitored via sums secured through the Section 106 agreement. Therefore, subject to suitable conditions, the delivery of this residential-led development is considered to be in conformity with the development plan, and therefore the recommendation is one of approval subject to the signing of the Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Michael. Helen, I haven't got a list of speakers. Sorry about that. Okay, we've now got the first speaker is Eleanor Lovett, who is speaking for the application. Eleanor, you've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, members. I am Eleanor Lovett of Claremont Planning, here tonight to represent the applicant, MAC Group, who are seeking consent for the demolition of the existing former day centre on Walsall Road to build a care home and age-restricted apartments. MAC Group is an established Midlands-based operator of existing care homes and developer of residential care-based schemes. The care homes provide single occupancy ensuite bedrooms in a high-quality environment that benefit from a range of additional facilities alongside traditional residential care provision, as well as apartments providing accommodation for older people that are able to live more independently. The site comprises the former day centre, which closed a number of years ago and has been vacant since, becoming a target for vandalism and attracting antisocial behaviour. It is located within the settlement of Great Worley and has been allocated for residential development within the adopted local plan. The allocation envisages a minimum of 25 dwellings. Whilst not providing traditional housing, the development will deliver residential development on the allocated site through the provision of a 90-bed care home and 32 age-restricted 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. The development will deliver much-needed care accommodation, providing choice for older people looking to downsize, which in turn will release family housing within the housing market locally. MAC Group has already received interest in the proposed apartments, demonstrating the pent-up demand for this form of housing. The development will also deliver approximately 70 full and part-time jobs once it is operational, ranging from care-based occupations to catering and management positions. The buildings will extend to 2 and 3 stories in height, with the care home and apartments to be provided in separate structures linked through a central entrance lobby and bistro. The development will be set in soft landscape grounds with 72 car parking spaces, including electric vehicle charging points, disabled parking, and 60 secure cycle parking spaces. As requested through community consultation, a new minibus lay-by will be provided to serve the adjacent caretaker shop. A new access is proposed from Walsall Road, with the existing driveway relocated to the south, which will improve the access to both the proposed development and the existing parking area to the rear of the caretaker shop. The applicant has engaged with the local community prior to the submission of the application and during its consideration, providing opportunities for local residents to inform and shape the proposals. A small number of responses were received by the consultant team prior to submission, which were considered and addressed in the application submission. Further consultation was also undertaken at the request of local councillors in July this year, where posters were displayed both at the site and at the library, detailing the revised plans. Although no further responses to the consultant team or the planning application were submitted following this. There has also been substantial engagement with representatives from the caretaker shop and local councillors, ensuring that the redevelopment of this site will complement existing operations next door. The proposals have been revised during the consideration of the application, working constructively with council officers. Through this, the development has been consolidated into one linked building, landscaping has been strengthened, and changes made to the internal road layout, parking arrangements, and pedestrian access around the site. The frontage of the development to Walsall Road has also been carefully considered and amended, additional detailing provided to the facade, and variation in refinish to break up the frontage and better respond to the site's context. Whilst the building will extend to 3 stories at the point of entry into the site, it will be of a similar height to existing 2-story residential properties, designed to be domestic and traditional in style, in keeping with the character of the area. The revisions have addressed concerns raised by consultees, ensuring that a high-quality scheme will be delivered. The application has also ensured that development responds fully to policy requirements, including appropriate separation distances between the proposed development and existing houses, ensuring there'll be no impact on the amenity of residents who live in existing properties located next to the site. The application represents an opportunity for the council to secure the development of a vacant, allocated brownfield site within the village of Great Worley that will provide 70 full and part-time jobs and deliver much needed care and retirement accommodation. It is therefore respectfully requested that the committee approve this application so the development can proceed without delay. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. I understand now a statement's going to be read out from Christine Longmore and Jacqueline Phillips. Is that you?
That's correct, Chair. Thank you. So a joint statement from Christine Longmore and Jacqueline Phillips. Our properties, which were built in circa 1935, are directly opposite the proposed new improved access road. Walsall Road, Great Worley, is an extremely busy road at all times of the day and especially busy at peak times. The amount of traffic has increased significantly in recent years, with added traffic caused by the access to the M6 toll motorway, the new retail park in Cannock, and new buildings in and around Great Worley and Cheslin Hay. The current building was built many years ago, when the road was much quieter and with only a few vehicles requiring access each day. We are deeply concerned about the amount of additional traffic which will come on and off the improved access road. There is on-site parking for 75 cars to accommodate the large amount of staff, doctors, ambulances, social workers, commercial vehicles for supplies and services, and of course the residents' visitors. We have had to pass issues with cars, in the past had issues with cars pulling out across the carriageway to turn right towards Cannock. There is a bus stop either side of the road, a pedestrian crossing, 3 side roads, as well as car parks for other commercial buildings, and all within a few yards of the access road. This will be a danger to pedestrians and road users alike. There is concern about the height of and size of the building. The current building is single-storey, and the proposal is for a 3-storey going down to 2-storey. We are also concerned about invasion of privacy, as we will be overlooked from several points of the new building frontage. At night, we will have additional noise, as well as light pollution from security cameras. The design is very modern and not in keeping with the current older style properties, and the building exceeds the height of the current surrounding properties. In summing up, we as residents do not think that the local planning and highways committees have thoroughly investigated our concerns. We believe that no consideration has been given to our privacy and how this new building will affect our mental health and well-being on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I'm now coming to the local members. Councillor Perry, do you wish to speak? We can do Janet first if you want. Okay. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. As local member for Great Worley North Ward, I fully support this application for the assisted living and care. It is greatly needed in the north of our district. We've got nothing like this at all. We are an ageing population, and as far as I'm concerned, we need a facility like this, and it's something that I was trying to get a long time ago. But unfortunately, the company that I asked couldn't afford to buy the land. I know residents in our area who would benefit from this facility and the support and this development would offer. Having been seen two of the assisted living homes, I was impressed with what we saw and what they offer to our residents, and even residents outside of for the wider community. And I think it's important that we take all this on board. I know there's been concern about the access for this, and it is important that the highways, I know they're not here tonight, but they have said this is okay now that everything's been altered, and they have done a lot of alterations on this scheme. And to be quite honest, I have, being at the voluntary centre right next door, the caretaker's house, as a trustee, I have got residents that we have in there on a daily basis, well, not a daily basis, come to our supper clubs and things, that are actually looking forward to this development so that they can actually possibly buy one of the apartments, or even if necessary, need to move into the scheme itself, because they've got big houses, and those are people that live actually round the site in Love Lane, Manor Avenue and places like that. And they keep asking me, Janet, when's this scheme going to come on board? And I've been saying, well, I can't tell you when it's coming on board. I know there's a lot of issues with different people regarding this, but all I can say is you can please some of the people some of the time, but not all of the people all of the time. And I do think it's an essential part of our top north of Great Worley, and you'll get Cheslin Hay, Essington people and people like that that need the support and need the assisted housing. And everything they can get there with the library. And as has been said, he took some of my thunder, the bistro for residents outside of the scheme can go in, hairdressers and things like that. They're all things that people in care need. And I really do strongly hope that that our planning committee here will support this application. Thank you, Chairman, for letting me speak.
Thank you, Janet. Remiss of me, but I forgot to mention that the late list. There is some information on the late list that needs to be made public. Helen's going to do it, I'm told. Oh, Michael's going to do it.
Thank you. I'll take this one. It's just updates to two conditions to reflect amendments to accurately reflect the some plan reference numbers, and change to condition 3 regarding the materials. The original wording specified purely brickwork, but there are other elements of materials proposed within the building, for instance, render and cladding. So we've widened it just to say external elevation materials, so that we pick up everything that's being used on the structure in the future. So we get that detail submitted to us. And I believe that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Councillor Perry, please.
Good evening, members, and thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to tell my views this evening. Just to put your correction on the officer's report initially, this building was still in use as a school in the 1980s. It wasn't a daycare centre, and the building behind, as you can see on that plan there, was built sometime in the 80s. So it's not in the 60s, as was said in the minutes of the meeting on the officer's report. Whilst I'm not against this type of development for the older residents of our community, I am really concerned that it is not what was first intended for this site. We do need the development such as this, but not at any cost to the older members of the community. By way of background, when this proposal was first put to us as ward members, we were under the impression that it would comprise of two different components. One was the care home element, and the second one was the provision for over 55s, as presented at the time, to meet the need of Great Worley, as we have a large number of proportion of 3-bedroomed houses where older residents wanted to downsize. Our view was we thought that these would be to buy. Reading the report, it doesn't actually say they're to buy. It says, well, the report's there for you to read. Bearing in mind that the report states that the most of the up-to-date assessment of the local needs set out in the long-term balancing housing market, LDBHM report 2017, and goes on to say that the scheme is not wholly compliant with the fairly balanced housing need identified for the area. Surely wouldn't it be better to defer an application until we have an up-to-date assessment that's available, as this is now 5 years out of date? The over 55s apartments would be perfect for those residents no longer in the process of raising families to sell their properties. My question is, are they to buy or are they only to lease? Because there's quite a significant difference in leasing and buying a property. So I need to put that straight. That's my first question. In reality, what we have here does not meet the need in any way. The accommodation on offer is now 2 buildings linked by a bistro, which will be subject to the restrictions in terms of sale for the properties that we thought would be for sale for older residents to buy. The fact that the proposal will now only be the benefit to those interested in shared ownership or social rent changes the situation completely and is, in my view, unfair. I'm sure Councillor Lawrence will have something to say because I have discussed this with him earlier on. And I said I won't remember everything to say, but I'm just saying. The next point I want to raise, I'm also very concerned that it's already been agreed that the developer will be allowed to deliver the affordable housing provision, which would be attached to this proposal off-site. In other words, the provision for affordable housing would be off-site. There is no provision in the local plan for any such development in Great Worley, which would lead me to assume that the financial contribution of £674,520 will benefit anywhere in South Staffordshire. I believe this is very unfair on the residents of Great Worley. Is it possible, if that is the case, can we have a window, a 2-year window, to come up with somewhere in Great Worley that we could spend this amount of money on that need that we need for the social housing? That's another question I'm asking. This should have been addressed by policies H4 and HC4, but hasn't been for anyone who lives in Great Worley's satisfaction. I note that 45 of the parking spaces which will be allocated will always be in use by the 45 members of staff, which will be on shift site at any one time. This only leaves 27 spaces for visitors, medical professionals and ancillary workers, before you can even consider the potential number of visitors to the bistro, which is intended to be open to the public. The staff running the bistro will also need parking spaces. How will this be managed without overspill onto the busy A34, as has just been said by the statements you've just read out? I know that there's no objections from highways, but actually there never is. This should be addressed by policy EV12. The introduction of a lighting scheme for the car park will result in light pollution in this area, impacting upon the amenity of the neighbouring residents. The increased use of the site will generate noise pollution that will adversely affect residents particularly. By the expected number of visits to provide medical assistance, especially during night hours, 24/7 care will result in quite a number of vehicle movements, ambulances in particular. I note that no lighting assessment document has yet been submitted to this application, which is quite concerning. I also note that to address the impact of the scheme, solely the care facility, on local health provision, the sum of £37,375 has been requested by the CCG. Will this £37,375 be ring-fenced for the care home, or will it also benefit the Great Worley parish as a whole? It is a drop in the ocean for what is already a much oversubscribed medical service. Policy EQ4 states that the design and location of new developments should take account of the characteristics and sensitivity of the landscape and its surroundings, and not have a detrimental effect on the immediate environment and on any important medium and long distance views. I know that in part this has been addressed in the conditions, and hopefully this will be effective. Policy EQ11 also states that development that is not well designed should be refused, especially where it fails to reflect local design policies and government guidance on design. Again, hopefully should be controlled by conditions. I'm also concerned that the construction work will badly affect the nearby properties of Fern Drive and Julian Close, which it says in the report will hear vibrations, etc., and noise vibrations. Are the homeowners aware of this? Even though this is expected to be transient, it will still be very inconvenient. This should be covered in policy EQ9. In relation to the consultation with the local community, I understand that the developer letter dropped the properties around the site and spoke with Landywood Voluntary Help Centre, but they failed to consult the village as a whole. I did ask twice for them to engage with the community. They did eventually place an A4 piece of paper outside the site and a poster at the library. This ticked their box for community engagement, which in my opinion was very poor. They had every opportunity over this last 12 months, since they can blame COVID. They also blamed COVID that they couldn't arrange an open day at any time this year. They could have had an open day any time this year, which is what I asked them to do. They really could have engaged better with the community, because I always feel that people have lots of questions to ask, and a lot of these people that were interested parties do not have access to computerised equipment. I cannot support this application in its present form and feel these issues should be addressed, as we are here to represent the best interests of local residents. Thank you. I hope, Councillor Lawrence, you can pick up and elaborate on some of the issues that I've raised tonight. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. I'm not going to speak yet, so I'm going to speak shortly. I do support a lot of what you've said, but you've raised quite a few issues and quite a few questions. Michael, do you want to attempt to answer all those?
Give it a try, thank you. If obviously I miss anything, please let me know. I've tried to make notes as we've gone. So in terms of the what type of units they'll be, they are going to be for market sale. This is the over 55 apartments. They will be offered for market sale in their entirety. There will be a service charge applied to the users which go in. That service charge will help to pay for the upkeep of the grounds and the community, not the community, sorry, the facilities within the site, so the hairdressers, etc. So, but they are purely market dwellings. That there is no shared ownership or social rent on the scheme. That has gone off-site in terms of the off-site provision for affordable housing. So that was the first point. In terms of where that money will be likely spent, I will turn to my colleague Kelly and she can pick up that for us. Thank you.
Try the decide. Thanks very much, Mike. Just in sort of picking up from a housing strategy perspective, as that's where we would look at how we deal with off-site affordable housing contributions. We quite often get off-site. What will happen is it'll be put in the wording of the section 106 to ring fence it and staircase for various considerations. It'll be over 5 years. And we've got one at the moment. We've recently had a section 106 payment for the site at Hazel Lane for an off-site affordable housing contribution. So we're currently out inviting bids from a registered provider to deliver that money on a scheme in Great Worley. So we have a track record of that's what we do. We take the same approach with this application if approved, and it would be in the first instance in the parish, and then it would go into the locality after a certain period, and then as a last resort in the district. But we have 5 years within which to spend that money. But we have a track record of delivering in the area where we get the section 106 monies. That's the approach we would take.
Thank you, Kelly. In terms of the car parking provision, as you state, the Highways Authority have offered no objection to the level of provision offered. It is compliant with the council's policies as set out within the local plan. And there is a travel plan within the proposal which will also seek to ensure that future users of the scheme and employees make the most of the sustainable transport facilities within the area. In terms of the lighting scheme for the site, you're right, we haven't had that detail yet, but it is covered by proposed condition number 8. So the detail will be submitted and discussed with the council's environment health team to ensure that the impact on residents isn't significant. We also need to consider it in light of the fact that the site is being utilised by bats to ensure that it doesn't impact on the ecology of the area. So it will be a very low level lighting scheme, to be honest with you, because otherwise it would have that adverse impact on protected species and local residents, obviously. In terms of the £37,000 for medical provision, that will be spent within the Cannock Villages healthcare area. Again, they have a certain time frame, the CCG, in which to spend that money, but it will have to go to a local health facility in order to offer enhancement to an existing offer. Hopefully that's everything, but let me know if I've missed anything.
Well, there is one that I think where she mentioned, suggested we should defer this item because the needs assessment is 5 years old. What's the view? Please on that.
In terms of that report, it is 5 years old, but ultimately this scheme helps to meet that need. That need is identified for the wider area. This scheme will provide a number of the lower, smaller units, sorry, a number of the smaller units that is identified as being required in the area, which will equally mean that on other sites there would be less need for those smaller units, so they could build some of the larger units. It's just a payoff, basically. There's no material planning issue with them offering a larger number of smaller units. If anything, it's quite a betterment for the area, in that the site was allocated for 25 or 31 dwellings, and now we're up at 125. So in terms of the council's 5-year land supply, we are over-supplying on this site, which will be a positive for the policy team in that regard.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Did you indicate you wanted to come back, Kath?
Just not on that point, on the first point of to buy. Does this mean that if someone bought the property, they could sell it to whoever they wanted to, providing they met the criteria of being over 55?
Oh, yes.
Okay, right. I think it's my turn. Kath, I was going to catch up anything that you missed, but you didn't miss anything, so well done. I've got just a few observations myself. We've waited, people of Great Worley have waited a long time for a development like this, and Kath has expressed concerns, and you can't please everybody all of the time. This, I think, is going to be a wonderful asset for Great Worley. It's going to provide 90 rooms where people can be cared for safely and securely. And a lot of those people will ultimately come from the Great Worley area. And they'll be leaving their houses and sending them on so that younger families can come in and settle in Great Worley. And it's a similar thing with the flats or the apartments that are for sale. Again, safe and secure accommodation for people that are still able to live independently, and then in a few years' time, if they feel the need to move across into the care accommodation, they can do so, and at the same time realise the value of their apartment and either pass it on to relatives or sell it. I'm pleased that the challenges and questions that you've asked relatively, I think, quite well been answered. I mean, the vacant building credit, almost £700,000. I think people of Great Worley are going to put up with all the building and all the additional pressures that that building will ultimately bring. So they should benefit, and that £700,000 should be spent in Great Worley if at all possible. I think the needs assessment perhaps is relevant, but it's only 5 years old, and we know there's a need there. And if we defer this today, we're just putting it off for at least another month or later. So I would urge us not to consider going down the road of deferment. I think it was 2007 or 8 when we had our first meeting in that building, and where we started discussing what we wanted to come out of it. And I think people of Great Worley have waited long enough. I think the lighting is an issue. We've got to make sure that when they do produce the lighting plan, it is low light and will not disturb residents that live around the area. I mean, if they put enough effort into the low lighting plan that they put into the sunlight plan, showing that nobody was impacted by loss of sunlight, I'll be quite happy with that. Car parks, we've never got enough car parking spaces. You know, if you had 100 car parking spaces, you'd have 105 cars come along and want to park there. And again, the money that's going to the CQC, again, I'm glad that that's going to be spent in Great Worley for the benefit of Great Worley people. So as a local member, I'm happy to support this application. Right, I've had my say. I'm going to now let the rest of the members ask questions at the moment. So if anybody else has got a question, please. No? Yes.
It's just one of curiosity, actually. In section 4, the consultation responses, the last one is raising concerns regarding the size of the living accommodation. Can you sort of give me any information on that? It is. I must have.
They are above the basic requirements, but I'll let Michael explain that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there was some concern raised about whether the size of the care facility rooms were large enough to meet the council standards, and they do. They're fully compliant. So yes, we noted that concern and then checked it, so it's fine. Thank you. That's fine.
Thank you. Michael Bull.
Thank you, Chairman. Has anyone indicated whether this site's going to have a controlled access? 75 parking places is mentioned. The Councillor Perry's quite right. It's an extremely busy road, the A34. Very busy. Unless there's some sort of control on the access, I'll be looking at that.
Good point. Let's see if we know the answer.
There is no control on the access proposed at the moment. Whether that becomes an issue at later time, I don't know. But obviously it's a dual use access. Well, will be a dual use access shared with the adjacent voluntary centre. So there'll always be a need for it to be open so that the voluntary centre can get in and use it. But at the moment, there's no control on that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, let's go into debate. Does anybody want to start a debate? Yes, Victoria.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to say that I really feel for local residents because this is quite a big development, obviously, and I'm really grateful for hearing the views of the local members as well. But I can only base my opinion on the facts in the report. Now, looking at the population of South Staffordshire and looking at the demographic in the country, we have an increase of over 20% of people age over 65 years. In South Staffordshire, it's 24%, which tells me that we absolutely need accommodation for people of that age and over. I see that there are no objections from Highways, so the mention about the access, there is no concern from Highways about possible accidents, nor from Natural England, from Nature Space, or from the NHS. And it does appear in the report that there's a travel plan in place with sustainable transport as well. I have heard from one of the officers that we're oversupplying on the site, so that's really good news for the rest of the area. So you'll have fewer build fewer buildings elsewhere in the village. 90 rooms, that's excellent. And I completely agree with the chairman's comments that, you know, we're in a situation in this county where we have little accommodation for first-time buyers, but what we need is for those people to move out and to move on and move up and eventually downsize into premises of this kind. So for me, it's a really, really good plan. I feel that we need the development. It's a great location. We hear from groups everywhere regarding building in the green belt. This isn't in the green belt. This is a perfect site for it. So I think other than sort of any conditions that were raised by Councillor Lawrence, according to the lighting and so on, I think I'm going to find it quite difficult to object to this application, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Any other member want to speak? No. In that case, I'm going to put the recommendations to the vote. The recommendations are to approve the application with contributions to various bodies. I'm not going to go through the annual report for you to read, and a list of several pages of conditions. All those in favour of approval, please show by a show of hands, please.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Against?
Those against, yes. Thank you.
1, 2.
Any abstentions?
No.
The application is approved. Thank you, members. Okay. Let's move on to the next planning application, which is 22/00309/COU, Elwell Nurseries, Wolverhampton Road, Cheslin Hay. And summarise the for us, please, Helen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Elwell Nurseries is the site of a garden nursery business located off Wolverhampton Road, just outside of Cheslin Hay and within the Green Belt. The site extends to approximately 0.7 hectares and includes a bungalow near the front and a range of other buildings, structures and polytunnels located to the side and to the rear, as well as an expanse of hard standing. The proposal is for change of use of the site from a garden nursery to B8 storage uses, including open storage. The application has been submitted by Datum Utilities Limited, a family-run company that provides connections to utility services. The proposal would provide a base for the company to operate their administration services and to store the company's own vehicles, building materials and equipment. This application has generated numerous objections from local residents, with principal concerns over the amenity of the area and highway safety. However, the applicant has confirmed there will be no concrete mixing or batching, no external bulk storage of aggregates, nor any industrial processes undertaken on the site. The Council's Environmental Health Officer, as well as County Highways, raised no objections to the application as amended and as currently proposed. Under the terms of the NPPF, elements of this proposal would constitute inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. However, there are very special circumstances which clearly outweigh the potential harm to the Greenbelt. The proposed change of use would not be considered materially harmful to the openness of the Greenbelt or its purpose, and there are no residential amenity concerns or parking or highway safety concerns that would warrant refusal of this application. As such, it is recommended that the application is approved, subject to conditions. So just to flick through a few photographs of the site for those members who aren't aware of the site. These 3 photos show some of the existing structures that are there. And the one in the centre shows the existing bungalow building, which is of residential appearance, and that's a conservatory to the rear. That would be used as the administrative offices on the site should the change of use this evening be approved. This photo shows some of the polytunnels that are existing on the site, which will be removed as part of the proposed development. So these will be demolished. As you can see, they're not of substantial construction. Again, the polytunnels on the left-hand side, a view out towards the end of the site, and then internally within the site shows the area of existing hard standing, which will be used for parking of staff and also one of the temporary buildings. Again, some of the existing structures. The middle photograph shows a view across towards the neighbouring farm buildings over that boundary wall, and then a view of the existing access, which would be used for cars only, no HGVs at this particular point. Following slides show the highway, the main road that the site fronts, and then the bungalow building, which, as stated, would be used as the administrative offices. And these final two slides, pictures show the nearest residential unit, which does sit adjacent to the site on the access road, which would be used for cars. So these plans are contained within your agenda, but just for clarity, the one to the top shows the existing site plan and the one to the centre shows as proposed. So it clearly outlines which buildings are to be demolished, which ones are to be retained for storage purposes, and where the vehicle parking would be located upon the site. It's worth noting Ivy House Farm and the residential property to the south, which is adjacent to the access road, but that access road would only be used for cars, not HGVs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Helen. First speaker, Eleanor Lovett. This time, Eleanor, you've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, members. I'm Eleanor Lovett of Claremont Planning, here tonight representing Datum Utilities. The proposal seeks permission to change the use of Elwell Nurseries from a garden centre to B8 storage. Datum Utilities are a family-owned company who've worked within the Cheslin Hay area for many years, employing a number of local people. Having taken on board all the comments and unrest associated with this planning application, we wish today to allay concerns, misinformation and put the record straight as to the company's intentions in relation to Elwell Nurseries. To address each point, the access has been revised with the gates moved further into the site. Storage bays for loose sand and gravel have been removed completely from the proposal. Concrete volumetric trucks, aggregate and cement silo that we operate have been relocated to other premises in Willenhall and therefore will not be moved to Elwell Nurseries, ensuring concerns of excess dust, wagons, noise and hazardous materials can be put to rest. It's proposed to use the site for the storage of company vehicles, including a grab wagon, 6-wheel truck, pickup truck and 8-wheel hook loader, as well as transit vans. Generally, company vehicles will be working on location, with the Elwell Nursery site intended to provide a secure location to store materials and vehicles. The operation of the site will be restricted by conditions to normal business hours, Monday to Friday. Up until recent years, Elwell Nurseries was a thriving garden centre, which would have had frequent visitors and regular deliveries. The Council's Highways Department has confirmed there's no objection to the change of use, as the proposals would generate similar vehicle movements to the site's former use. The company would observe weight restrictions on the road, with HGVs using the site turning left into and right out of the site away from the village. There is not anticipated to be any material harm to the openness of the site through its reuse for B8 storage, especially as some of the existing structures and buildings will be removed. The applicant will reuse existing buildings for storage of equipment, tools and materials, whilst the bungalow will serve as an office. 3 existing polytunnels at the rear will be removed, with the existing hard standing used for parking of company lorries, whilst the existing car park will be used and kept and used for staff cars. The applicant has agreed conditions restricting the location of external storage, ensuring the future openness of the Greenbelt is safeguarded. Relocating the business to this site ensures that the company can remain local, retaining existing employees and securing future employment, which are significant benefits to the local economy. In combination, this represents very special circumstances that clearly outweigh the potential for limited harm to the Greenbelt. It's therefore respectfully requested that committee approve the change of use to enable the relocation of Datum Utilities. Should permission be granted this evening, this will enable the use of the site solely for B8 storage. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Eleanor. The next speaker who's going to speak against the application is Rob Paddock. Thank you, Rob. Rob, you've got 3 minutes to speak. Rob, put your microphone on.
Okay. Thank you. Firstly, our biggest concern as residents on the Wolverhampton Road would be the major impact that this development would have to the openness of the Greenbelt. The same authority rejected caravan storage at Hilton Lane, and the vehicles that are going to be stored at Elwell's Nurseries are far larger than caravans. Also as well, the second point is that if this second site, the site in Whittle Hall, has been acquired for the mixing facility, it doesn't make logical sense to keep pushing for storage in Cheslin Hay, because it just logistically doesn't make economical sense to store vehicles at one site to then go and pick aggregates up every day. It just doesn't make logistical or economical sense. Another point that we'd like to raise as well is a lot of the structures, polytunnels that are being taken down and being developed. What are those structures going to be used for in the future? And then the final point would be the noise pollution and the light pollution that's going to be more prevalent during the winter months, because a lot of the language in the application is quite deceiving. Elwells has never been a garden centre. It was a plant nursery run by a husband and wife. It hasn't been thriving with multiple deliveries and lots of customers flowing in and out on the highways for the last 5 years, as all the residents on the road will attest to. So the environment is going to change quite drastically, and it is not a like-for-like business. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paddock. Councillor David Lockley.
Yeah, that one's working. I'll get the rest of it.
David, you two have 3 minutes.
Okay. I'm going to try and discuss this on the basis of planning issues. Can I ask you to look at item 2.2 on the on your papers, and this similar application that was based on a site in Landywood Farm in Great Worley refused planning permission for the retention of storage facility. That should tell us something. It was refused. It seems to me that they're trying it now in Cheslin Hay, and we should do the same. It did 231 mentions outside storage areas, which seems to me that there's going to be a mixture of building materials there, and it goes on to say later on in the report that there is building materials, so they're going to be loose probably, and there may be some in bags, but bear that in mind. It also mentions on 232, it mentions 10 mini diggers. Oh, I think mini diggers should tell us something, that there's going to be loose stuff moved around. If it's sand, it's going to get in there in the air. And I'll point out that the schools, there's Cheslin Hay, there's 2 schools in Cheslin, and there's the primary school and the high school are in direct line of a west wind, the southwest wind, which will blow any material that gets airbound over to the schools, and they're going to be playing out and sports facilities, and they're going to be breathing that in, which is not good. I'll refer you to the consultation responses now on 4. I don't know what page that's on. There's no pages on this lot. But it's I'm wearing my thumb out here. No, I'll get to it in the end. I've got it now. There's a lot of pages to this, isn't there? It's a bit of a pain. What? Sorry? Is that all? Oh, well, I can't. Well, the conflicts mention EQ9, protecting residents' amenity, health and safety, public and general environment, and I agree with that. And EQ10, protecting safety of the amenity. I think that applies when you're moving aggregates and sand like that. It's going to get in the air. It's going to get on your cars. Well, I think we've all experienced that, haven't we? Sand coming in from the Sahara and landing on your car. Your next morning, you get up and your car's covered in sand.
Yes, thank you, David. We've got, I think we've got your message.
Have I got to finish now?
You have, yes.
3 minutes ain't enough, you know. Not for me, anyway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You're welcome. Councillor Mike Boyle.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a few comments to make on this, observations I want to bring to members' attention. I acknowledge the fact that the applicants have made some progress insofar as they say they're no longer having bulk storage on site, which is selfish progress. But it also means that they are unspecified non-aggregate building materials. What are they? Sand, lime, cement? Where they're going to be stored? Mixed, because they will rise up in the atmosphere. We have dust everywhere. Will they be mixed on site? There are at least 18 transport and construction vehicles on site at the same time, not counting 10 to 15 cars, 6 HGVs, some of which are 32-ton trucks, I believe, 2 pickup trucks, petrol or diesel fueled, 10 mini diggers. They're all going to be emitting noise, unloading throughout the day. The mini diggers will have to be loaded up and onto transports to take it to site, so they're going to be transient. The vehicles using the manoeuvring area will emit noises from the diesel engines, also air pollution from the diesel fumes. Consequently, there'll be a negative impact on the residential quality and the amenity due to noise and disturbance, generation of dust. Is there any provision, Chair, for noise measurement on this site, this application? It's right next door to residential properties. It's opposite and adjacent. I believe, Chair, the Council takes a sequential approach to planning applications, and where there's more than one site to be considered, we consider the non-Greenbelt site first. And the applicants have said they have another site in Willenhall. So my question is, why isn't this being put on the site in Willenhall? That's one of the points I'd like to make. I ask members to bear that in mind. Second point is highway safety. As I mentioned earlier on, Wolverhampton Road is a classified road. It's only a B road, B4156. It's got a speed limit of 30 miles an hour past the site. It's a very narrow grass verge on the development side and a narrow footpath on the opposite side. Some of the properties actually are put straight onto the pavement, onto the main road. They're not suitable, in my view, for heavy loads to be transported on and off access to that site. We also have large timber lorries already using this site and breaching our 7.5 ton weight restriction, which they're allowed to do because they're going to a sawmill, which has recently given another 2 years life. They're massive things. Additionally, we're going to put these heavy goods vehicles on top of that. The increased volume of heavy goods vehicle traffic in the area and the access will be an issue as this road is often congested at school times. We have a school there only a few hundred yards away with 1,300 plus pupils, a sports centre, a primary school and newly built residential accommodation, all using this road. Well, I think it'll be an absolute catastrophe, and the proposal would generate additional traffic movements along an already congested road. Move on, Chairman, now to the environmental impact. As well as local residents, the parish council's allotment sites, 2 schools and a leisure centre close to the proposed site, and dust and particles from the materials used could have a negative environmental impact on all concerned, and will impinge upon the types of outside activities that residents closest to the proposed site, contrary to policy EQ10 of the Council's core strategy, GB1 and EQ4, I believe. I'll ask members, how will this application preserve or enhance the natural environment? How is it going to improve the natural environment? It's Greenbelt site. Got to deter from it. Expressions of concern being made by the local school, and many, I think the school's objections came in rather late. They'd missed the deadline, but I know the headmaster was most concerned about this application. And what I see, there's no benefit to the residents or the Greenbelt by replacing an existing nursery. This was never a garden centre, has been said. It was a small family-run nursery providing plants for domestic use. I've used it myself for a period of time, been there. And it's been run down and been quiescent for a number of years now. I'd like to move on to the residential amenity chair. You'll bear with me, I had a few notes. It's quite a complex application, this. Every survey conducted by this authority shows protection of the Greenbelt is a top priority for our residents. Time and time again, it comes top in all the surveys we do. This application is a clear case in point, and I've not been convinced by the evidence I've seen so far that there are any very special circumstances. What are these very special circumstances? They're not clearly defined in this application. The development, in my view, will be out of character with the existing Greenbelt area, and the long-term noise and disturbance will adversely affect the amenity of the local residents. Noise and disturbance will have a detrimental effect on the living conditions of the occupants, contrary to policy EQ9 of the Council's core strategy. I understand, Mr. Chairman, there have been over 60 objections received from 32 contributors, expressing their concerns about the health and well-being of local residents and school pupils. If we have to weigh in the balance, which is the most important, the view that's been taken in this report, or the residents that live close to this site, what judgment do we make? What are we here for as planners? We're here to provide decent planning, sound planning for the benefit of our community. And clearly, this is in conflict with our local community. Nobody wants it except the applicants. And from the applicant's point of view, to give some balance, I can understand for them it's an ideal site. Unfortunately for them, it's in the wrong place, my view. The NPPF core planning principles include requirement of planning to seek a good standard of amenity for all existing and future occupants of land and buildings. Core strategy EQ9 requires that all development proposals consider the amenity of nearby residents, particularly with regard to privacy, security, noise and disturbance, pollution, odours and daylight. Policy EQ4 of the core strategy advises that the design and location of new developments take account of the characteristics and sensitivity of the landscape and its surroundings, so as not to have a detrimental effect on the immediate environment and on any medium long distance views. This side is surrounded by green fields to the rear, nothing but fields, it's farmland. The bottom half of this site is fenced off as greenland. They may well in the future want to extend that site even farther into the green belt. I ask refusal of the application due to the likely harm to the residential amenity from traffic congestion, noise, dust and air pollution, and additionally in the winter time, light pollution. I haven't seen anything about lighting for this site, Mr. Chairman, perhaps I've missed it, because in the winter, this time of year, they go on some lighting for that site. It conflicts with GB1 of the core strategy, sections EQ4, EQ9, EQ11. That, Mr. Chairman, summarises the objections that I've noticed so far, but I retain an open mind until I've heard any future arguments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mark. Right, let's go to questions from any other member. Yeah, Ian Sadler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Has any assessment been done of effect on air quality for the residents around the site, please?
Let's ask the question. Yes, please, Emma.
Sorry.
It's all right, thank you. To you, Chair. Environmental Health have been a statutory consultee on this application, have been quite heavily involved because it has evolved as a proposal. Going forward, there's been several versions of the proposals, and there were concerns by Environmental Health when this proposal was for the mixing of aggregate concrete on the site. It was deemed unacceptable. What has happened is now, because it is just for storage, and there's no processing or any kind of manufacturing on the site, it is deemed to be acceptable in terms of that use. So environmental health are comfortable that there will be no adverse impact on amenity to the residential properties within the vicinity based on the proposals before us. I also think it's worthy of note that if in the future issues do arise, there is legislation firmly in place through environmental health to be able to pick that up. From a planning perspective, here tonight at planning committee, we can only assess the impacts lightly on residential amenity as proposed, but there is a strong arm of legislative framework in place should proposals cause a problem in the future that aren't covered today. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you. There are just another couple. We're talking about lighting on site. If you can just answer that one. And just again, describe what the very special circumstances are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again through your chair. Yes, there's no details of lighting on the site. So there is a condition specifically regarding that, which is condition 13, which says it does not grant or imply consent for the installation of any means of lighting to the site or the building. So any lighting would need separate consent in its own right. So we would have the opportunity to consider that, and therefore its impact on residential amenity for nearby occupiers. In terms of the very special circumstances, they are outlined in the report. If you just give me a second to find the relevant section. So 5.5 of the officer report sets out that officers do concede that there is harm to the green belt, but the very special circumstances outweigh the harm. So that's outlined in the report as to the conclusions that the officers have come to and the weight that's been afforded there.
Thank you, Ellen. Members, do you wish to debate this application? Yes, Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to support the local members on this, and also as a neighbouring village that frequents this road very frequently, almost every day, I do not consider that this application demonstrates any very special circumstances at all within the, and why should we be ignoring the Greenbelt policies in this case? We shouldn't be. It does not demonstrate any special circumstances, in my opinion, reading the report. You may think otherwise as officers, but I think as members, we have to make that decision ultimately at this planning meeting. The storage of heavy goods vehicles and the tipping of aggregate onto this site will have a detrimental effect on not only the neighbouring properties, but also the two schools, as has already been mentioned, also the allotments across the way, the dust particles, etc., and also the leisure centre. The storage of HGVs, etc., which is what is proposed for this site, will have a detrimental impact on the view from the local public rights of way. It is green belt, and it will have a detrimental impact. The quarry sawmill, the road itself, I appreciate again, we've had no notification from highways. As I said before, we never seem to, unfortunately. But this road is absolute mess nearly 10 months of the year, I'm being honest and truthful, because it's got a quarry just a bit further down the road with red dust running from it. It treads into people's homes and properties. We've got the sawmill that has just been mentioned further into Cheslin Hay. We've got Ollybush Garden Centre with big HGVs coming down. We've also got the digester from Hollybush Garden Centre. The road is treacherous, particularly in bad weather like we've had today. It's like there's puddles of red mud. I'll tell you what, I wouldn't like to be a resident in Wolverhampton Road. I'm telling you now, because it's an utter mess most of the time. And we're expecting these HGVs, these extra HGVs, to be going up this road into the village. Apart from the particles of dust, etc., I've already mentioned, that will blow whatever, because it's on quite a high ground. To the rest of the, if you can't see it on there, it doesn't really give you a good view of it. I've experienced the mess that is on this road from residents. The phone calls I have is unbelievable, and I just wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. So I support the local members in refusing this planning application. I also have experience, by the way, and I know we have to take each application on its own merits, and this is a separate application, but I also had experience of this particular operator or whatever you want to say, in Landywood, Upper Landywood, when it was when they had it up there, the crushing plant was up there as well. But the road and what they did to the roads up there was an absolute mess with HGVs. And I know I had a site meeting with the chairman, so I'm hoping he'll bear me out and support me on this one, to say. So I fully endorse what the residents are saying and what the local members are saying, and this should not be allowed in the green belt. It isn't special circumstances. There are other places this works can be, these things can be stored, and likewise the HGVs. It is not fair on the residents or the green belt in this particular instance. So I support the local members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Helen, do you want to come back in?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Hopefully I can come back on a few of the points that have been raised by members in the last few minutes. As officers, we do feel that very special circumstances exist as outlined in the report, but obviously the weight of the decision maker is thoroughly in your hands with that one, so that's absolutely fine. In terms of the light pollution, we've covered that by way of condition 13, but I think it's really worthwhile noting the conditions, because it is something that, whilst it is a storage use, it is very heavily conditioned. Should members be minded to approve that, that is something that is incredibly enforceable. They're very precise conditions, and should the occupier stray from that, that's something we could certainly investigate and enforce against. So it does restrict particularly what can be stored here. Condition 3, for only the storage of vehicles, tools, building materials and equipment described in the application document. So it's not a broad B8 use that we would be approving here, should we be minded to do that this evening. It's specific to this business. It is restricted in hours from 7 AM till 5:30 Monday to Fridays, and no operations at all on weekends and bank holidays. The HGVs can only be parked within a specific area. So whilst I note your comments on the openness of the green belt, it is managed in that respect, and they are transient because they do come and go. So the harm has to be considered within that context. Likewise, the external storage is limited to within certain buildings, and that is conditioned as well. There's been extensive comments and commentary with the highways team on this one, likewise with the environmental health team, both of which, it's fair to say, raised concerns early days with this. But through the iterations of plans, the changes of the proposals, we have got to a point now where consultees are comfortable, and I think it's worth members being mindful of that when the professional consultees are not concerned about the development as it stands now and as it's proposed. And there is a transport routing proposal which is conditioned so that we do manage the way that the vehicles come in and out of the site, and as well as the HGVs turning in and out in a certain manner. So that's been heavily managed and guided by the highways team over in county. So they are comfortable with it now. And to be clear, no mixing and preparation of aggregates on the site. I think it's probably worth flagging that obviously there has been a lot of objection to the development, but that has changed as it's gone forward in terms of the proposals. And ultimately, we have to assess the proposals on their planning merits. It's not just about the number of objections. We have to be able to consider those points. And that's where the consultees come into play, especially with regards to environmental health. Note the comments about the quarry and the issues with the road and the mud on the road, but obviously that's a separate entity. We can't assume that this business will be run the same, and there is separate legislation that would cover that should that become a problem. And the final point I just wanted to cover was the Landywood site. Obviously there were issues there, the way that was managed without planning permission, but that has now been shut down, and the purpose of this site is to be able to manage that situation, with the Willenhall site being where the mixing and the aggregate goes on. Appreciate what the public speaker said about that not making a lot of sense, but it's not for us to judge a business plan. That's down for the individual businesses. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Any other member wish to speak? Councillor Ball, yes.
Mr. Chairman, a couple of points I skipped over in my haste to get it all out. I'd like to know what the status is of polytunnels. This was a nursery, and I understand it, polytunnels are a temporary thing. They're a frame with a bit of plastic tucked over the top. And if you drive along the A5 towards Tamworth, which I do quite often, they're taken down regularly each year. So if they're temporary, what's their status in law as a footprint for permanent development? That's one point. The other point I've been passed to note, it's a bit like House of Commons, how long are these conditions going to be monitored, and who's going to report and reported? I mean, enforcement, I take it, will have a role to play, but how long will that take? Takes a long time enforcement as it is. The other thing, Mr. Chairman, is you're turning this site, this what was a nursery, not a garden centre. They didn't sell statues, swimming pools, and all the other paraphernalia that you've got at Hollybush or Piper's or some of the lot. It was a nursery. And you're going to replace that with what is in effect a marshalling yard. You're going to have 6 32-ton heavy goods vehicles parked overnight, 10 mini diggers, 2 vans, 10 to 15 vehicles for the employees. Then moving on, they're not going to be static all day. And if you can't park caravans like that, how come you can allow to park these? I'm not happy with the definition given about these special circumstances. It was an officer's view, which I feel is subjective, but there's no clear identification of proof through evidence. So I still want that point clarified.
Thank you. Helen? You're going to take this one?
Chair, I'll just take the issue in relation to the polytunnels. Chair, there's been a lot of case law in relation to the status of polytunnels. It is a very, very grey area, and it really depends upon, you know, the nature of the polytunnels, their size, how long they've actually been there for, and how they are actually attached. But, you know, in this particular case, as far as the polytunnels are concerned, they don't represent you know, the significant area of, you know, the sites and the polytunnels, you know, in terms of structures, you know, are only part, you know, of the equation in the planning balance. Helen, I'll deal with the issue of you know, the polytunnels. And, you know, in relation to, you know, to the points that Helen has actually made, you know, we fully understand, you know, the concerns that, you know, you have actually raised in relation to this application. But, you know, what I would actually ask members to do is to just to review and revisit, you know, the conditions that, you know, are placed, you know, on this application, because they are, you know, very, very robust. I appreciate the point that you've made, Councillor, in relation to monitoring the conditions, but, you know, we all know that it is not administratively possible, you know, for every local authority to monitor every single planning condition. However, you know, looking at the conditions, you know, they do deal with the concerns that have actually been raised. And I particularly want to draw your attention, you know, to the highway issues, the highway concerns that you've actually raised, because there is nothing in this report which actually identifies it that is a highway concern. Quite to the contrary, there's a very robust condition which actually stipulates that this development shall be carried out in accordance with the transport plan. You know, before members deal with any decision, you know, on this particular matter, you know, my invitation to the members is to actually ensure that, you know, if, you know, there is opposition and you're minded to refuse, you have to have before you good, sound planning reasons to refuse this application.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just to come back on your point on enforcement, obviously we can't be everywhere all the time in terms of the amount of developments that are approved. We rely wholly on members and members of the public to update us if there are breaches of condition. That's a statutory process that is in place. We have a fully staffed enforcement team that would investigate any inquiry that comes in with regard to breach of condition. It's something we take very seriously because as officers, the conditions make the development acceptable. So if they're in breach of that condition, that is something we would look into. We register enforcement complaints and investigate them within 12 weeks, dependent on the severity of the breach, depends on how quickly we would act on that and what course of action we would take. With regard to condition, there's quite a lot of action we can take quite quickly and with very little right of appeal from the applicant. So it's very much in the applicant's benefit to adhere to the conditions, and I do think it's worthy of note that we have been very tight and robust with these conditions and the applicant has agreed to them, so that they're very mindful of what the restrictions we're intending to put on them and they have agreed to adhere to that. So we have to take that on face value and accept that in planning terms the conditions make the development acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sadler, wish to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. I may have missed this. Is there any provision in the application for storage of bulk fuel for vehicles? If so, if it's not there now, can we make sure that it doesn't suddenly appear? Or if it does appear, that it's properly done, funded, etc. The other thing is, You've got mini diggers and things on site. What are they doing about security, especially if they say they're not going to work over the weekends? I'm hoping that they've thought this through, and it may not be planning, but it just concerns me, that's all.
Okay, let's see if we've got some answers for you. Ellen?
Thank you, through you, Chair. No proposals for bulk storage of fuel on site, but certainly propose, again, development that would need consent and would come back before us for assessment on its own merits. In terms of security, no specific proposals, but not within the context of the current application, something we would be able to give an awful lot of weight to. Part of their business plan and their own mechanism for controlling their own use on the site would be the way that we would look at it, because you are right, there may be an issue there, but that would be very much down to the individual company to manage and how they would, bring that into fruition for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak? Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. Whereas I'm a little bit reluctant to get involved in issues that obviously the local members are putting a very good case. A couple of things I have noticed. That Ivy House Farm, which is adjacent, I think, to the site in question, already includes B1 and B2 industrial and B8 storage use. So this wouldn't be the only site in the area provision for storage like that. What I'm a bit concerned about, no one's mentioned, is the proposed operating hours, 7 AM to 5:30, within a residential area. I find that a little bit excessive, but it's, like I said, it's not hoping not to get involved really, but it's something I've read the document, and I do find that, like I say, a very early start and quite a late finish. It is referred to in the conditions as regards, find it again, but it deliveries to site. No work should be carried out. No materials shall be delivered to or dispatched from the premises and site other than between the hours of 7 and 5:30, Mondays to Fridays. I think perhaps we could look at that addition. I think those hours are excessive personally, but, and as regards, this document has been put together by a professional, and it is very difficult, I think, for us to go against the recommendation.
Let's just deal with your suggestion for a condition. Ellen?
Yeah, through you, Chair. From an officer perspective, they're quite tight in terms of operating hours. 7 till 7 is considered to be the operational day. So anything earlier than that, absolutely, we wouldn't expect there to be deliveries or operations, but that's in accordance with the recommendations from the environmental health team. So that's been assessed by them from a professional perspective in terms of noise, and obviously consideration of residents when it comes to weekends and when people expect that little bit of extra time to have a slower start to the day. That's been considered by no operations on a weekend. So we would consider those to be reasonable in terms of the proposals by way of a planning condition. Thank you, Chair.
You certainly can come back.
If I lived within earshot of the development, I wouldn't take kindly to diesel engines starting up at 7 o'clock in the morning, Monday to Friday. That's my comment.
I agree. Well, I mean, if you think you are going to have difficulty accepting the recommendations, unless there's a change to the working hours, you can suggest or recommend or propose that we amend the hours of work. It's up to you.
Okay, my experience of contractors don't work till 5:30, finish about 3:30 every day, and they don't tend to start much before 8:30, 9 o'clock. But I do, if we put a time of 8 or 8:30, that's going to conflict with school opening hours. So I am aware of that as well. But, it's not for me to make that decision.
Okay, I just offered it to you, Councillor Perry.
Thank you. Can I just make a comment, Chairman? It doesn't matter how many conditions you put on planning applications. unless they're monitored, which they aren't, sometimes the developer or whoever forgets what they are. It's a bit like putting double yellow lines on a road. Unless somebody sits on the end of that road and stops cars parking on there, you're always going to get it. So I'm sorry, it doesn't matter how many conditions you put on anything, unless they're adhered to and monitored, which they are not monitored, then you're wasting your time.
Councillor Boyle.
I'm a final bite of the cherry, I think, on this one. Chairman, I draw members' attention to core strategy EQ9. I'll just read it again. It requires that all development proposals consider the amenity of nearby residents, particularly with regard to privacy, security, noise and disturbance, pollution, odours and daylight. This application, I think, conflicts with all those. To my mind, the amenity value is the essential element in this case. We have a duty to protect the green belt. That's what we're supposed to be doing. I cannot still see any special circumstances. They've not been defined clearly enough for me, so I'm still not happy with that. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of amenity, I'm repeating what I've already said really, but the conditions are considered to ensure there would be no impact on amenity. So we do feel that element of the proposal has been addressed. And to reiterate, environmental health, I've looked at it in full, have no concerns in terms of noise disturbance, and we have to be guided by those statutory consultees, and given that that's their area of expertise. If I could just come back on the conditions. Conditions are necessary to make development acceptable. That's the way the legislative framework works. But they do need to be monitored. There's clearly a lot of interest in this application from members and the public, and we would expect that mechanism for monitoring to be firmly in place, and we can commit to looking into those issues should any arise. That's why we have a dedicated enforcement team and an enforcement plan to make sure that happens. It's really important as officers that conditions are adhered to. That's what makes them acceptable. So we would monitor that, and it is something that we can enforce against. And in terms of restricting the hours, conditions also have to be reasonable. So they have to be shored up by evidence base. So it's difficult just to pick times and say we think that that's reasonable. Environmental health tend to work around the operational day, which is where the 7 o'clock comes in, and that's kind of proven in case law. So it's just about the reasonableness tests that we have to look at when we're making planning conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. On that one then, I think it's reasonable in this case to suggest hours of 8 till 4:30 because of the location. I know that goes against exactly everything you said.
Okay,
That's what I'd like to propose anyway.
I just want to hear from other members. Have any other members got a view on that?
Yes. Chair, I was just going to reiterate the point that, Helen has made. There's a condition which has been suggested that an industrial activity, should be restricted, to 4 p.m. There has to be an evidence base. There has to be an element, of reasonableness here. And you did actually earlier on, Councillor, make the point that, in terms of the starting of the operations, we have to actually avoid the conflict, with the school traffic, as well, because that in itself is a problem. So, I would actually invite members to look at, the hours from the point of view, of reasonableness again.
I did ask a question whether any other member had got an opinion on that, and I didn't get any response from anybody.
I'll withdraw the proposal then, because there's no seconder. Okay.
Okay. Any other member wish to say anything else on this matter? Well, you know what's coming next. I've got one recommendation before me. Nobody wants to talk any further. Okay. Well, I'm going to put it to the vote then. The recommendation is to approve this application with the conditions. All those in favour, please show.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favour. Those against, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And any abstaining?
No. The application is approved. Thank you, members.
You just go and see.
Some of the people, some of the time.
Yep. Councillor Lockley, we need to get on with the meeting. You can stay if you want to. Thank you. Okay, then members, let's move on to the next application, which is 22/00757/FUL, Kingswood Centre, Barn Lane, Kingswood. Helen, summary please of the application.
Thank you, Chair. Kingswood Centre is an outdoor education centre comprised of accommodation buildings and outdoor activities, accessed from Barn Lane to the east, which leads to Holyhead Road, the A464. Whilst the entirety of the site is approximately 2.9 hectares, the area of the current application is a smaller area to the north side of Barn Lane, before it turns north and terminates into an overgrown track. Retrospective planning permission is sought for the replacement zip wire and abseil tower and a landing platform at the southern boundary of the property. The replacement towers are located just to the south of the existing take-off and landing towers, which needed to be replaced due to age and unsuitability. The western tower is 12 metres in overall height, which does include the roof, with the take-off platform situated at approximately 10 metres in height. There are two zip wires travelling north-east perpendicular with Barn Lane. The landing platform is approximately 4 metres in height. The site of the towers are naturally coloured and timber clad with galvanised steel handrails. The take-off tower is topped with a monopitched roof with a box profile sheet roof, and each tower has a footprint measuring 3.5 by 3.5 metres. The site is within the Greenbelt, but the proposal fits the definition provided within the NPPF for an exception to inappropriate development as outdoor sport and recreation that preserves the openness of the Greenbelt and does not conflict with its purpose. The proposal is therefore considered acceptable and is compliant with Core Strategy Policy GB1 and the NPPF. At this point, can I please refer the members to the update list, which notes comments from Environmental Health Team. After full consideration, the proposal is not considered to be harmful to the amenity of neighbouring residential properties with regards to noise. Conditions are proposed to ensure the use of this equipment is restricted. This restriction does not, however, apply to the wider site, as this is established use and facility. An objection has been received from a neighbouring occupier at the Old Church House, approximately 75 metres to the north of the landing platform at Kingswood Centre. The objection pertains to the noise generated by the use of the Kingswood Centre. When the zip line was originally approved in 2001, there were no hours of operation conditioned to limit this use. However, upon the completion of the noise monitoring by Environmental Health Team, a recommended condition has been added to restrict the hours of the proposed zip wire. The LPA solicitor has reviewed the recommended conditions and agrees that it passes the planning tests. Overall, the scheme is considered acceptable and recommended for approval, subject to conditions pertaining to lighting and the removal of the existing towers. So this is the site area in front of you here outlined in blue. That's the wider site area in total. The small red boxes that you can see there are the equipment that is proposed, albeit retrospective and already in place, and what is to be removed as this is replacement equipment. So this is a view of the wider site from the access gates from the outside and across the rear boundary. And this photo shows you the newly erected structure, which is the zip wire on the right hand side, and the one on the left, which is no longer of use. And upon the site visit today that members were present on, the zip wire actually has been dismantled, so that one is no longer in use. it has been conditioned to be removed within 3 months should the application be approved this evening. And just a final slide to show you the location of the proposed zip wire, which is already in place, which is the boxes outlined in red. So this one here is the Abseil Tower and the zipline tower, and this here is the landing platform. And this is the zip wire that was already in place, given approval in 2008, and is being demolished because it's no longer of any use. And a final slide showing the elevation of the proposed zipline tower. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. I understand that the speaker on this matter, David Newton, isn't well enough to come, and you're going to read out his statement, are you? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's correct. Yeah, he has bronchitis, so he's unable to attend this evening, so I'm going to read this out on his behalf. Let me just get the timer so that I'm not overrunning. The planning officer has prepared a well-balanced report which recommends the application for approval. We broadly agree with the report conclusions, but would like to make some brief comments in support of the planning application. Kingswood purchased the site in 1983 and have operated as a children's residential facility for 39 years. The existing tower and zip line has been on site since 2008 and has become unsafe to use and needs replacing. The development has not resulted in any change to the operation of the site. We note that there has been one objection to the application from a local resident regarding noise and overlooking. As confirmed within the committee report, there is no overlooking of the residential property by the landing platform. We note the comments made regarding noise at the site and have been working with the resident to ensure that the activities at the site are not giving rise to adverse impacts on residential amenity. The changes we have made include moving the campfire and utilising the campfire on the field furthest away from the resident as much as possible to reduce noise during the evening. During our campfires, children sing up to 5 songs and toast marshmallows and drink hot chocolate. It is designed as a winding down and bonding exercise, and the rowdiness is therefore discouraged and stopped. We have moved the observing groups from the old zip wire shelter and the old climbing area, which has been moved the noise 50 metres away from the residents. No activities after 9 p.m, and the zip wire will run no later than 4 p.m. as much as possible. Ensured any noise complaints are shared with the team, and we have briefed our activity instructors to keep the noise from the groups at a reasonable level. The Environmental Health Officer has suggested the imposition of a condition of the operation of the new zip wire. We do not object to this condition in principle. However, the current proposed timing would impact on the operation of the site on weekends and bank holidays in particular. The site does not operate reduced hours on bank holidays, as these usually fall within the school holidays. We generally operate the zip line from 9:15 till 4, finishing at 5:30. However, if we lose the option to run the zip line in the evening, then this could severely impact our adverse weather planning, which requires moving activities into the evening, for example, when the temperatures are cooler and in the event of a severe heat wave like we had during this summer. Or if we need to abandon the session during the day for safety reasons, i.e. there's a thunderstorm. However, this would only happen in exceptional circumstances. We would therefore request that the bank holiday hours are updated to align with the Monday to Friday hours, and the Sunday operations are able to commence at 9:15, so we don't lose any additional morning slots. We will continue to work with the Environmental Health Officer and the resident in order to ensure we are a good neighbour. We therefore request that members resolve to agree with the officer's recommendation and approve the planning application.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Chair.
Now, I understand that Councillor Davis, who is the local member, has got a communication that he's going to read out on behalf of the President.
Thank you, Chairman. For approval. Thank you. These are the words of Mr. Williams. I wish to object to the application of the grounds below. Point 1.1, the towers are too high. Platform is level without bedroom window, and this allows overlooking to our property, house and garden. 1.2, this is an issue raised in an early application by a previous owner of our property and others. 1.3, the covering letter from the applicant states, A, the development is small in nature. I have to raise the question, can a structure 14 metres in height and in use 7 days a week be described as small scale? The application states that the upgrade of the towers is to enhance the usage of the site. Point B, the application site is well screened from residential properties by existing vegetation. The site is actually screened by largely deciduous vegetation, meaning that for a large part of the year, there is no visual or screening from noise whatsoever. Point 2.1, unacceptable noise levels. There are other further new developments on the site which have moved the event near to our property. These are not shown in the plans. This has led to an increased level of noise which has become totally unacceptable, has an adverse effect on the enjoyment of our property and led us to leave home to avoid the noise. A normal level of noise during the day on a daily basis may be considered acceptable, but we don't think noise of zip wires running and instructors shouting commands until 8:30 or 9 p.m. and regularly every weekend is acceptable. Point 2.3, we noted noise levels on Saturday the 27th of September from 10:30 until 17:30, on Sunday from 19:30 to 2300. Monday the 29th of the 9th from 20:30, low level. We have made a formal complaint to Environmental Health regarding noise and have kept a log of events. May I request that time restrictions are introduced to restrict the usage of the centre to more reasonable times. In view of the anomalies and errors on the plans presented with the application, may I request that a site meeting is arranged by the LPA so that interested parties may get a current view of the situation at Kingswood Centre. A tower requested for demolition appears to be newly erected. There are new developments not included on the plans. In conclusion, the objection to the retrospective planning application is based on number 1, the tower is too high and allows a degree of overlook into our property, particularly through a bedroom window and into the garden. And number 2, the noise level on a daily basis, 7 days a week and into the evenings, to the extent that we are unable to have our windows open, use the garden and need to alter our lifestyle to cope with the noise level is not something we have to endure. Environmental Health, but to date, when this was written, there were no comments, but I think members may have a list of from Environmental Health in your pack, recording the noise levels on the particular dates shown. Thank you. These are the words of Mr. Williams. I reserve the right to speak myself.
Helen, do you want to address any of the issues raised in that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. In terms of the proposed development here, yes, it's retrospective, so it's already in place. I think it's worth being mindful that it is a replacement facility. There has been a zip wire on the site since 2008. So that is the grey box there linked by the zip wire. So that's the one that's been decommissioned, is no longer in use, and this is the new one here. This landing platform here, which is the closest to the residential property in question, which is just to the north of this plan here, sits 75 metres from the back of the property. In terms of separation distance, that's more than adequate in terms of privacy and overlooking. I think for context, if we were going to be approving new dwellings that were back to back, we would expect a 21-metre separation distance between habitable rooms. So 75 metres is quite considerable, and we don't consider that to be an issue in terms of loss of privacy. There is screening in place, which I totally accept is deciduous, so the leaves do fall off the trees. We visited today when the leaves had dropped in the main, and you could see there was adequate separation between the facilities proposed here and the rear of the properties. So with or without the screen, and the separation distance means that it's adequate. And just to confirm that the issues with the plans being inaccurate was raised with the case officer, who did go out on site, check them, and we are comfortable that what's proposed is accurate and reflects what is on site. Final point is we can restrict the hours to the zip wire, absolutely, because we've got that capacity as part of the current application in front of us. We can't restrict the hours to the whole site. That's not reasonable or relevant to the determination of this application. So it goes back to the test for conditions. So we are more than comfortable to condition the use of this zip wire based on environmental health advice, and we would advise that members take that advice. But we cannot restrict the use of the wider site. It's been established for in excess of 30 years. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Alan. Councillor Davis now wishes to speak as the local member.
Thank you, Chairman. I've visited the site on a number of occasions, and I've watched and listened to the zip wire being used, and I must say it's very well organised, very well drilled, and safety is observed impeccably. I've not, to be honest with you, heard any particular amount of noise. I may not have been at the right time of day, I don't know. I know that the children do have campfires, so again, I may not have sort of heard these campfires and songs happening and what have you, as Mr. and Mrs. Williams have sort of reported themselves. But I believe that the conditions that have been recommended by the planning officer may well help the situation as far as the noise levels are concerned, and also I know that environmental health have had no real sort of excessive problems with the noise recorded. I think the terminology I heard used was it was like a bit like a children's playground at times, which is there in black and white. But I do think that one predominant noise I've heard when I've visited is I've heard noise from the main road, traffic noise, which to me is to the dead side of the centre. I could hear quite clearly. But again, this is what I found on my own visits. But as Helen said, the property is 75 metres from the zip wire, and the legal limit is, if they were building a new house, they would be 21 metres. So that I think that does sort of enforce the case in favour of the zip wires and the towers. But as I do approve and do support the new hours. And despite what was said earlier on in the meeting, in another case, these hours will be monitored. Believe me, because I have the residents' interest at heart, and I believe they should sort of be able to live there, as peacefully as possible, with as little noise as possible. If it becomes excessive, there will be steps will be taken to prevent it. Thanks, Chairman.
I just want to make a comment and say thank you to the members that turned up. Unfortunately, two of you went inadvertently to a different location, and by the time you'd realised your mistake, actually complete site visit. It was a very short site visit, but I do thank you for turning out to the rain. Well, I couldn't know, but somebody else could, but they'd all walked off by then. Anyway, Councillor Sanders, put your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was one of the ones who did finally find the site in time to view the structures. And I think with the conditions of the time, I don't see that particular facility causing any noise nuisance. I think there could be noise nuisance, but I don't think it's from that. It's, as has been said, the established use of the rest of the site means we can't condition that. So, yeah, I can see why people are unhappy with it. But I don't believe there's anything further we can do other than monitoring the noise levels, which I don't think are being caused by the site we're considering. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Has any member got a question before we go into debate? No? Does anybody wish to debate this matter? No? Officers? Okay, well, the recommendation before you is to approve the application. And we're just talking about the installation of the zip wires with conditions. All those in favour, please indicate. Unanimous. Thank you, members. The application is approved. We've got one more planning application before we go into a report on appeals. It's application 22/00800/FUL, and it's Douglas Farm, Sandy Lane, Hatherton. And can you just summarise for me, please?
Thank you, Chair. Did you want me to wait for Councillor Wilson to return? She just disappeared.
We know what. Okay, well, let's give her a minute then. Sorry. Welcome back, Victoria. We're waiting for you. David, please. Thank you. Kevin, away you go.
Thank you, Chair. This application site extends 380 square metres and passes through the centre of an existing field previously used for equestrian purposes. Innoextras Road measures 82 metres in length and has been constructed to serve Dovely's farmhouse, which is adjacent to the northwest. The site is within an area of mixed use comprising residential, agricultural and equestrian sites and is within the Greenbelt. There are dwelling houses directly opposite the site which fall under Cannock Chase District Council and are different, more dense and urbanised character. Given that the site's lawful use is for equestrian purposes, it is considered that the regular and consistent use of the new access by vehicles accessing the dwelling house and any potential parking would result in this land becoming part of the planning unit of Dovely's farmhouse. The proposal is therefore considered to be tantamount to a material change of use from the land from equestrian to residential. Since the site sits on the border between South Staffs District and Cannock District, the field containing the application site forms a buffer between the agricultural and equestrian uses to the west and the dense residential uses to the east. For that reason, the change of use to residential would fail to preserve the Greenbelt's function to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas and to assist in the safeguarding of the countryside from encroachment. In addition, the extension of domestic curtilage or garden land would have an adverse visual impact, which would be harmful to the openness of the Greenbelt by way of potential inappropriate development, including boundary treatments, changing the character and the setting of the land to a cultivated appearance, outbuildings and the proliferation of domestic cluster that is normally associated with domestic gardens. Whilst it is accepted that the new vehicle access is likely to be safer than the previous access in highway safety terms, there is limited independent evidence to demonstrate that the previous access was unsafe, to the extent that the new access through a separate site was necessary, or that the other access point closer to the dwelling would have not been suitable. County Highways team state that there is no accident data associated with the former access point. And at this point, it's worth referring members to the additional notes that have been supplied with some additional documentation that was submitted by the applicant earlier this week. The development that has taken place is considered to be an appropriate development within the Greenbelt, and insufficient justification has been advanced that amount to very special circumstances needed to clearly outweigh the harm of the Greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness, as well as any other harm resulting from the development. As such, this application is currently recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Helen. We've got one speaker, and that's Mr. Philip Hammonds, who is speaking for the application. Mr. Hammonds, you've got 3 minutes, please.
Dear members, thank you for letting me comment on the new access to Dudley's Farm. The access was laid purely on safety grounds and linked to an access gate that was already in place. The access road has taken up very little in way of grassed area, as confirmed in the county ecologist's consultation response. The visibility issues when trying to leave Dudley's by way of the old entrance has been evidenced by an independent report submitted with the application as dangerous and the new entrance as safe. The planning officer quite rightly checked with the police as to accidents in Sandy Lane, but who reports an accident to the police or council? If an accident happens and a party agrees to be at fault, the insurance company simply deal with the accident and no reports are sent to the police or council. Unfortunately, rendering the statistics from accidents from the police not really indicative. So to assist with the application, I've obtained independent reports as to the dangerous nature of the old entrance and witness statements of multiple accidents in the Sandy Lane within the last 5 years, and more can be supplied if required, all clearly identifying the old entrance as dangerous and the new one as safe. The concern from the planner's report was around Greenbelt and exceptional circumstances must be presented for a planning application to be considered. With the evidence and independent report, it is clear there is a danger to walkers, cyclists, motorists using Sandy Lane with the old entrance in use, which I lead you to look at as the exceptional circumstances. A concern from the planning officer was also future planning on the paddock areas in question, but this is protected by planning law. And also, to add to this, I've sworn a declaration that states this green area will always and only be used as paddocks and grazing land. Comments made by the county ecologist state it's only a small loss of pasture grassland and recommended mitigation with the planting of trees, of which 100+ trees have already been planted and more should the application be passed. The report also states it has no detrimental impact to the character or street scene, so in keeping with a countryside location. I conclude by saying the new entrance, I'm sure for everyone who's looked at it and been to the site, is both in keeping with a country area and without doubt safer for all. Greenbelt is protected by law and also by my statutory declaration. So please consider the new entrance as tidy, in keeping with the area, no detriment to anyone and without doubt, as proven, much safer for road users, pedestrians, cyclists using Sandy Lane. Thank you for the time and opportunity to comment on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Members, we've got no local member present. Does any member wish to ask a question on this application? Nope. Does any member wish to go into debate on this application? Councillor Perry, thank you.
Just a comment to make, Chairman. On the way here this evening, there was another accident at Longford Road and Hatherton where it meets the junction at the top there. So there are accidents there and I do know of them myself. So what's in one report from Highways doesn't actually, I support the person that's just spoke actually in relation to the accident and in the report that there are accidents there. As I say, there's been one this evening as we've come here. I heard it on the radio as the road was Longford Road was completely blocked. Thank you.
Helen, yes.
Through you, Chair, thank you. Yeah, in terms of the additional papers that were provided, the additional information that Mr. Hammond provided was clearly outlined. There's no disagreement from officers' perspective that this access may be safer. The details that were provided do not form part of the accident data that's used for assessment for planning purposes. That is very much when there is emergency services called. So it's anecdotal evidence that we've got in front of us tonight, which we can't give a lot of weight to. We're not saying that those accidents haven't happened. What we're saying is they can't be classed as accident data for the purposes of assessing highway safety reasons. So that's the reason why we don't consider we have significant evidence that this demonstrates very special circumstances. We need to have that evidence base, and we simply don't have that data to be able to prove that. The statutory declaration that's provided is noted, but again, in planning law cannot be given significant weight. It's not a legal agreement, so it doesn't hold that bearing. So just for the purposes of members, that's the reason behind the recommendation for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 85, Western Power is one of the consultees who were consulted. National Grid do have apparatus in this area and do have concern regarding the works. The National Grid plan shows that there is an HV underground cable in the verge adjacent to the area in question. If ground levels are to be altered, well, surely they've been altered already if it's a retrospective. I'm not quite sure what Western Power are saying. Are they saying it's dangerous as it is, or dangerous if, I assume, the concrete will have to be removed if it's fused? Can anybody clarify that?
Try.
No, it's fine, thank you. Yeah, there's not a lot of clarity in their comments in terms of what they've provided. It's their assets they're looking to protect. So in terms of material planning considerations, we wouldn't be able to give it significant weight. What they're saying is they're a bit unsure about what's happened given the retrospective nature of the application, and it would be the burden would be on them to check their assets and any implications that the retrospective development may have had, but that would sit outside of our decision making. Thank you.
No other member wish to speak? I've got a few observations. I had a lot of difficulty in convincing myself to agree with the recommendations to refuse, because it's quite clear that this new driveway that's been created across this piece of green belt is a safer method of getting into and off the site. But I then thought, well, this is the third attempt that has been made to create an entrance or exit onto this site. The first one was closed off a long time ago and is now in sole use of some stabling that is within the Mr. Hammond's ownership. So when they closed off that one, they created entry exit 2, which is the one that is now deemed to be dangerous because of display, etc., etc. That was put in 2013, and I thought, let's have a little look, see what I can find. And I found a Google picture that showed display, and looking to the left from entrance number 2, the hedge that's immediately in front of the house is about the same level as the fencing on the entrance, and it gives you a good view up the road. If you look at today's pictures, you haven't got that good view because the hedge has grown probably a foot, and what that's done is created an obstruction to your view. Now I thought to myself, well, surely if they cut the hedge back down to the level it was a few years ago, it would be a safer entry exit site. Looking to the right, there's less of an issue, I contend. Yes, it's still a narrow view, but that's the lane for you at the end of the day. And we shouldn't forget that Mr. Hammond, in fact, built this second entrance exit himself, so he obviously at some stage deemed it to be safe. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done it. Now, if we say, no, we're going to allow this, it doesn't make Sandy Lane any safer. All it does is make people entering or exiting from the new location safer in their manoeuvre. So I'm going to perhaps agree with the recommendation on this occasion. I've said my piece. I won't. Does anybody else want to challenge or say anything before I put it to the vote? No? Okay, well, the recommendation is to refuse this application, and I'm now going to ask you for a show of hands, please.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those against? 1.
Okay, the application is refused. Okay, it's been a fairly long session. Let's quickly move on to the monthly updates from the lead planning manager. Over to you, Kevin. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chairman. My update report covers the usual items as each month about proposed training, any changes in national policy, recent appeal decisions, and then an update on statistics for both planning enforcement performance, but also the statistics on planning application decision making. So turning first to future training, obviously we've had a session before Planning Committee this evening on permitted development, which have already received some quite positive feedback to that. As I said earlier, we will provide the slides for members to have a look through in their own time, and if you want any further questions or comments, then do come back to any of the planning team. We've had a request also for further understanding of planning enforcement. I know that Helen mentioned earlier on about planning balance and material weight that seem to have some firm nods. That may be an opportunity as well. So I will take that away. And as always, if there is anything that you feel particularly pertinent, then do let Helen or myself know. There's been no changes in national policy since last report, so I'll then move on to the planning appeal decisions. There are 7 to report back this time. Obviously, there was no planning committee last month, which is why we have a few more than normal. The first appeal relates to an enforcement notice regarding the material change of use of a dwelling house to a residential care institution, and that was at 2 Woodlands Drive, Coven. The appeal was dismissed for a number of reasons, and the enforcement notice was upheld with some minor corrections, largely due to the impact on local character and amenity, as well as local parking. That decision was actually circulated to all members at the request of Councillor Sutton. The second appeal was against the refusal for stationing of caravans for residential purposes and hard standing in a utility, day room and ancillary use and stabling at the land west of Dark Lane in Coven. The appeal was allowed for the permanent use of the land for the stationing of caravans. The inspector recognised that it was inappropriate development in the green belt, but that a number of factors actually weighed in favour of that application. There was quite a lot of detail in that report as to what the inspector felt were those material factors that were in its favour, but not limited to, for example, the best interest of the child, the fact that we have an unmet need for gypsies and traveller pitches in South Staffordshire, that we don't have a 5-year land supply of gypsy and traveller pitches, and that we have failed to find alternative accommodation for such needs. And overall, that whilst it was inappropriate, the factors in favour of it the inspector felt clearly outweighed other considerations, and the appeal has been allowed on a permanent basis. The third appeal relates to an enforcement notice regarding the material change of use to land at a sawmill. The sawmill is at Sarden Road. Whilst the appeal against the enforcement notice was allowed, it was actually a successful outcome for the council. So I just want to be really clear on that, because on the face of it, it might not look that way. The reason why we took the enforcement action in the first place was to prevent that development becoming time immune and then not enabling that land, which is identified as safeguarded land for housing, to be able to come forward through the new local plan. So whilst the inspector did allow it, it is on a sort of time limited period in which that use has to cease, which is the outcome that we wanted in the first place. So we can see that has been successful. The fourth application relates to, again, another enforcement notice, and this was for the change of use again for another gypsy site, and this was for the mixed use of land and keeping of horses as a residential caravan site near the previous application we just discussed at Sandy Lane, Cannock. This appeal, however, was dismissed and the enforcement notice upheld, again with some minor corrections, because the inspector concluded a number of things, but ultimately that there was considerable harm to the landscape of the AONB caused by the development, and it noted whilst the proposal would lead to greenbelt harm, it did not consider that the harm was outweighed by other factors in favour of the development in that case. So overall, the very special circumstances weren't justified. The fifth just realised only 5, not 7. Sorry, it's been a long day. Sorry. There's only the fifth and final appeal that I need to note on. Oh no, there is 7. Sorry. Oh my word. The fifth one is because it's 3 applications, 3 appeals. That's what it is. Apologies. So there's 3 separate appeals at Deaconsfield Brood, number 25, number 31, and 35. So there were 3 separate refused certificate of lawful use for allotments in agricultural use. Some members may be aware of this because it has been contentious for some time, of where some properties had extended their garden into a field at the rear of the property, and it led to a number of planning enforcement cases into the agricultural field. Overall, the inspector then concluded that the evidence that was now available, with them saying that that extension of garden land was now being used as an allotment, which is an agricultural use and therefore acceptable to be used in that area, was acceptable, and actually that the appeal should not succeed. So they've been allowed to use that land as an allotment. As you can appreciate, given the enforcement history, we will be keeping a close eye that they are being used as allotments and not as an extension to garden land. So that concludes the section on appeals. Then turning to just an update on West Midlands Interchange and the M54 M6 link. Those updates are coming through obviously separate working groups and WMI, but the link is there if you want any of the further information on any of what's been consented. Finally, turning to statistics of performance, planning enforcement is currently at 79%. That is slightly below our 80% target of investigating cases within 12 weeks, but this is to be expected at the moment because we are closing down a number of old cases and either moving them forward for enforcement action or shutting them as not expedient. And because they are historic old cases that are well outside of the 12 weeks, that's going to affect our performance. It also dovetails with quite a lot of appeals work that's underway. If you see the reports this evening, how many of those were enforcement, it's to be expected, and we're sure we can get back above the 80 in due course. Finally, to development management, there has been an update since the last report on speed. So our target is to be for majors is to be determining majors 60% above the time requirements. Above 60 we're at 92.7%, and for other applications we need to be above 70% being done in the time frame required, and we're at 86.2%. In terms of quality, which is the appeals and the overturns, there's been no update since the last report, and we still remain below target of 10% for majors at 1.8 and for others at 0.6. And that concludes my report, Chair.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Does any member wish to ask a question or comment on any elements of that report? No. We've all had enough, haven't we? It's been a long session, but a very good one. The training was very, very useful. I fear I'll have to rerun it now because I've only learned a little bit. Thank you for your endurance this evening. Wish you all hail and farewell. Safe journey home.